Hello viewers, welcome to my channel. I'm Hasham. In this video, I'm going to explain you about the civil and criminal liabilities of auditor. In the last video, I've explained you about the rights, duties, then qualification, disqualification, qualities, appointment of auditors. All these topics I've already covered in the past videos. So if you have watched earlier videos, definitely you might got a good command on the subject of auditing. If you have not watched the earlier videos, I suggest you to go to the playlist of my channel. Select the subject auditing. Watch the initial videos, get a good command on the subject of auditing. Confidently you can write in examination. Now before starting this video, I advise my viewers to take a screenshot of this video, of this board, so that you can be able to write down the important points that will be very much helpful before preparing for the examination. Take a screenshot and be ready. So now I'm going to start the liabilities of the auditor. Broadly, we divide the liabilities into two, that is civil liability and criminal liability. The civil liability of auditor will arise on account of negligence, on account of breach of trust, that is misfeasance, or under the Companies Act 2013. Different provisions are there where the auditors are personally liable. Apart from that, criminal liability is also there where punishment is applied to auditors. But first of all, I'll explain you about the civil liability. So civil liability for negligence. Negligence means carelessness. Sometimes the auditor will be careless while performing the functions of auditing. In that case, he will be personally liable. Who has to make good the loss. It's a civil liability. So the civil liability of an auditor for negligence include the following. So here what are the points? An auditor is made liable when it is being proved that the auditor was careless or negligent while performing his duties as an auditor, and this has resulted in loss. If it is proved that the auditor was negligent or careless while performing his duties, due to which the client or the company has incurred the loss. Due to the negligence or carelessness of auditor, the company has incurred loss. Then the auditor will be liable to make good the loss. Next, the auditor might be personally liable for any loss incurred if in case there are acts of omission or commission because of auditor's carelessness. Due to auditor's carelessness of omission or commission, errors are made. In that case also the auditors are personally liable to make good the loss. The next one, in other words, civil liability of negligence arises if it is proved that. The conditions are there. If these conditions are proved, then only there is a liability, civil liability on the part of the auditor. What are the conditions? The auditor was negligent, careful on duty, negligent or careless on duty. If it is proved that the auditor was careless, negligent while performing his duties, first condition. Second condition, the loss as a result of the auditor negligence. That means the company has incurred a loss on account of negligence of the auditor. Third one, the loss was suffered by the client of the auditor. That means the loss should be, occurred to the client of the auditor, the company. So if these three conditions are satisfied, then the auditors are personally liable. Civil liability. He has to make good the loss. Whatever loss the company has incurred, that loss has to be paid by the auditors. That is a civil liability on account of negligence in performing the duty. Now, liability under the Companies Act. The Companies Act 2013 has given elaborate provisions regarding the civil liability of the auditor. So what are the provisions of Companies Act? Here I am going to explain. The auditor is held liable for criminal liability under the following cases. The first case, the court has the power to summon and scrutinize any officer of the company. The Companies Act 2013 has given the power to the court, that the court can call for any books of accounts for scrutiny for of the officer of the company, including the auditor, if they have been suspected to be indebted to the company. If the court feels that the person is indebted to the company, for fraudulent act, in that case, the court will make them liabilities, any officer including the auditor, any officer of the company including the auditor. Secondly, in case if an order is being passed for winding up of the company and the official liquidator suspects that a company official including auditor has committed any fraud, then the auditor is liable. In the case of winding up order, liquidation of the company, an official liquidator is appointed by the court. So this official liquidator, if he thinks that there was fraud conducted by any officer including the auditor, then the court, the auditor is personally liable in that case also. Rules are enlisted for prosecution of fraudulent officials, including auditors and members of the company. Companies Act has given rules in which if a company suffers any loss on account of any officer of the company, including auditor, in that case auditor is also liable. In concerned with the power of the court, it conserved with the power of the court to give relief to an accused auditor if he believes that the auditor is not liable and has honestly carried out his auditing duties. The law has given the power to the court that the court has the power to relieve the auditor if it is proved that auditor is not liable. It is not due to the negligence of the auditor the company has suffered the loss. In that case, the auditor is not liable. So these are the provisions given by the Companies Act 2013 regarding liability of auditor. Now, liability for misstatement in prospectus. In the prospectus, if there is a misstatement, then also the auditor will be liable. But there are some exceptions to this liability. The auditor is liable to pay for any loss to the shareholders or debenture holders. Normally, the shareholders and debenture holders will take the decision on the basis of prospectus. If the prospectus contains some misstatement, then the aggrieved party can claim the loss from the auditor. And in case he has given any false statement as an expert in the prospectus. In the prospectus, if the auditor has given an expert view, on that case, if it is misstated, then auditor is also liable. But however, the auditor is not liable in two circumstances. If there is a misstatement in the prospectus, then also the auditors are not liable under two circumstances. What are there? He gave the statement in good faith and had no knowledge that the statement is false. When the auditor has given the statement in the prospectus, he was in good faith. He think that it was correct, but ultimately it was proved wrong. So there is no intention of giving a misstatement. Unintentional false statement has occurred. In that case, auditor is not liable. Similarly, if he takes back his permission in writing prior to the registration of the prospectus or prior to allotment of shares, if the auditor has taken back his view in the prospectus by writing, by giving the permission in writing, he has taken back his position before the allotment of shares. In that case, also auditor is not liable. Now, liability for misfeasance. Misfeasance means breach of trust. The auditor is occupying a position of trust because many people will rely on the audit report, on the audited accounts. So if there is a loss to any aggrieved party, the aggrieved party can claim damages from the auditor. So an auditor is liable to pay for the damages to an aggrieved party for any breach of trust or misfeasance. The time limit for taking action is 5 years. The law says the aggrieved party can take the action against the auditor in a period of 5 years, not beyond that. Criminal liability. So far we have discussed about the civil liability of auditor. Now I am going to explain you about the criminal liability, where the auditor will be punished. Not only the liability is only in making good the damages, but also he will be punished by law. That is called criminal liability. So an auditor is considered as criminally liable under the following situation. The first situation, he is liable for presenting false statement in the prospectus. First of all, if he is liable for making false statement in the prospectus, then criminal liability punishment will be, he is liable for punishment for 2 years in jail and rupees 5,000 fine or both, unless he proves that the statement was wrong. That means if an auditor makes a wrong statement in the prospectus, then he will be punished by law 2 years in jail or 5,000 rupees fine or both, unless he has proved that the statement was right. Next one, he is held liable for fraudulently forcing the people to invest the money. Fraudulently, if the auditor is forcing the other people to invest the money in the company, he will be punished by law. It's a criminal liability. Then he is liable for fraud during the process of winding up of the company. If during the process of winding up of the company also some fraud occurred on account of auditors, then he is criminally liable. Then punishment is, he is liable for a punishment up to 7 years in jail and fine. He is liable for intentionally ignoring the material facts. He is personally liable. Criminal liability will be there if intentionally ignoring the material facts or providing false information related to balance sheet, reports or any other certificate or prospectus or any other document. If he makes a false information, makes a false details in different reports, balance sheet or reports or certificates or prospectus or any other document, he will be punished by law. Liability for professional misconduct. Actually, auditor is a professional. He is a qualified chartered accountant in practice. So if he makes any fraudulent act, then ICAI, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, will also take action against that auditor. He will be debarred from practice. So he is held liable for breaching the professional code of conduct. So ICAI has given a code of conduct and every chartered accountant in practice must follow the code of conduct. So if there is a breach of code of conduct, then there is a liability. Criminal liability case can be applied by ICAI. Liabilities under different statutes, different laws are there. The liability of auditor under different laws. The different laws example are liability in case of income, liability from Income Tax Act. According to the provisions of Income Tax Act, the true and fair accounts must be submitted to the Income Tax Department. If there is a fraud, if wrong financial statements are prepared and certified by the auditor and these financial statements are submitted to the Income Tax Department, in that case, Income Tax Department can prosecute the auditor. So if in case the auditor certifies wrong accounts which are submitted to Income Tax Department, then he is liable for imprisonment up to 2 years and further he might also be disqualified from practicing. So 2 years imprisonment and also the auditor will be disqualified from practicing if we submit a wrong statement in the Income Tax Department. That is also a liability, criminal liability. Next one is liability under Consumer Protection Act 1986. In India we have an act called Consumer Protection Act. In that act also the auditor may be criminally liable. Example, an auditor would be charged under the Consumer Protection Act if he gives a wrong advice towards payment of fees. If he has given a wrong advice to the payment of fees, then also he will be criminally liable under the Consumer Protection Act. So in this video I have explained you about the civil and criminal liability of auditors. So civil liability under negligence or according to the Companies Act or making a misrepresentation in the prospectus. Similarly, criminal liability will arise under different statutes according to the professional misconduct. The ICAI can take the action for breaching the code of conduct like that. So this is the end of this video regarding the liability, civil liability and criminal liability. We'll take up the next topic in auditing in the next video, inshallah.